So our topic today is creating a harmonious family life, and the idea is to make it practical, because sometimes we sit and we read Gurbani, we do our Bart, we do our Simran maybe in the morning, and then we have the separate life sometimes when we go to work, we deal with our families, and it can become disjointed. So we've done the Bart in the morning, but then there's Galish in the family, or there's stress at work. And so this session is about sharing between all of us how we incorporate Gurbani, Gurmat, into our daily lives and implement it. So going beyond reading the Bart, going beyond understanding the Gurbani, but how do we implement what Guru Sahib is telling us in our daily lives? Because we all have some sort of things going on. Either there's relationship challenges, it might be the bachche, it might be the grandchildren, it might be husband-wife, it might be mother-in-law, it might be stress at work. And some of the feedback that we've got from the other sessions is time is a huge constraint. How do we fit everything in? And how do we take all of the gems, the jewels that are in Gurbani, all the answers are in there, and implement that within our lives? So the question that we've been starting with, well, first of all, is if anybody wants to share what some of their issues or challenges are. Obviously you don't have to give loads of details, but just kind of what do we struggle with day to day? Does anybody want to share? Oh, sorry, we can start with introductions.
Do you know each other?
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay. Yeah.
Skip that.
Or we could just go around and you can say where you're from and give a challenge. That might be good.
For me, my struggle, I think, is being triggered by the kids.
Mm-hmm.
So you know what you know,
Yeah.
and then sometimes the kids will do something and you still find yourself reacting in ways that you think, I should know better than to react in that way.
Yeah.
And it's always afterwards that you have to then think about it and say, okay, what can I do different next time?
Angie.
So that's a struggle.
With that one, definitely. Angie.
My name's Harbir. I think one thing we've spoken about before, one thing I've noticed that I do go through phases of is I experience physiologically some feeling of anxiety, and I sometimes wake up with that. And even this morning at 2:30 I woke up feeling anxious.
Okay.
And it's just random, and thankfully I have enough tools to nip it in the bud and to kind of not have it last a long time, because I can imagine if it lasts and it continues, it can be quite uncomfortable. But it's just strange that it does recur, and it just makes me question, what is it that I'm thinking, or what am I doing in my day that could be potentially triggering that?
So in a nutshell, what is like the main thing that helps you with that?
Breathing, remembering that nothing's wrong, everything's perfect, hukum, everything is as it is. Just like the kind of, it's the words in your head, either they can make it worse or they can bring it down. So the breath, the Simran, I don't really know, you just kind of...
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you, Angie.
Darshan Singh. I think it's enabling dependency. So when you've got a family member that needs dependency on you, and because you've had it for so long in your life, and you're having to deal with it, and even though things may be going swimmingly, you still preempt that happening. So that's probably where it affects your own home as well, even if you're living separately, and just being able to cope with that. Thankfully we're not better now, but that's probably a struggle.
Angie, thank you.
Hi Khalsa, just Singh. I think I struggle with my little one sometimes when I can't find something to discuss with him or like share with him in terms of the context, like what should I do with him in this daytime. And because I didn't have sometimes much stuff to obviously do with him or do some games, I end up sitting there, and he didn't talk much as well. So he ended up obviously doing something he wants to do himself. So it's a time managing sometimes over the weekend I struggle with. Yeah. I think that's it, right?
Thank you. Angie.
I don't know
to start really. So I'm trying to think how to get it down into a nutshell. But for me, I guess spending too much energy is not taking anything in. So normally it feels like over the last few years I've always been in the plus, so I can spend, whether it's kids, mum, other things you got to deal with, everything's cool because I feel like I'm in the plus, whether I come to a smartgum, a camp or wherever else, I'm gaining it, so I'm spending it. But for the last few months, possibly last year, it just feels like I'm running on empty. And there's no end of stuff you've got to do. And you know, that just marks me out, and it comes out of the kids and Raj and other stuff like that. So that's quite real, and that's right now basically. So
I would say I'm a very fortunate individual, whereby if I kind of try to look at every aspect of my life, there's not really any tension there. Yet, for some reason, I always feel like I'm in the middle of a thunderstorm.
Right.
I feel like I've got 2-3 different lives. I feel like right now is one side of me, and then there are other sides to me, which, like you said at the beginning, there's a disconnect. I think I'm very fortunate, very, very fortunate to be married to my wife, because she's always connected from my perspective when I see her. She's, during her breaks, at work time, at home, she's smashing out the Dilruba, you know, she's like listening to Kirtan, she's going to sleep listening to Kirtan. And I'm like, that thirst that she's got, I don't have that.
Right.
And then, you know, for years now I've been coming to camps and, you know, grown up with a lot of the Sangha. You know, seen Benji for years. And it's almost like every time you come here, it's almost like you're starting from the beginning again. And doing this bachar yesterday, that we are imperfect human beings, and we are, and I think Vijay Singh was saying that, you know, we're full of, our boat is full of holes. You know, we've got all these flaws, and that resonated with me, because I feel like I am that boat full of holes, and you know, I am constantly trying to empty that boat out, you know, and it's only through when I'm with some Sangha, an additional guy jumps in the boat to help me lift some of the water out, so that I don't drown. And I feel like as much as I know this, Sangha is the way for me to be able to get through this crazy world, where despite me not having any issues, whether financially, children's perspective, health perspective, house perspective, car perspective, anything, why am I still living in this crazy turmoil type situation, you know? So I don't know if that helps or whatever, but it's just my current situation.
Yeah, again, I think there's a lot in there that we can all relate to. So I wouldn't say it's just you, like we all feel that way at different times.
It's actually very refreshing to hear you speak so openly and articulate things that I think we all feel on some level at different points in our life.
Because we don't talk about it openly, we think everyone else is okay, you know?
So, do you know, this is the first group that's been so open. So it's kind of, it's really refreshing. It's because usually we kind of go straight into the board and explaining Gurbani concepts and kind of, and we hopefully Gurkripa we will do that as well. But I think it's good, isn't it, to take stock and just to kind of come together at this point and just reflect on life is hard, and everybody has particular challenges, one if not more. And that's the reality, Hannah. So sometimes I think there's an expectation that life should be perfect, picture perfect, or we should be perfect human beings. And I think maybe if we bring that expectation down a bit and be like, okay, this is the reality, that we're human beings, and by that very fact we have struggles, and we struggle with our internal conflicts and things like that. But that doesn't mean that we can't experience an elevated kind of experience in this life. And that's what Gurbani, and we'll go into this a little bit, but Amdeep and I have very similar stories as yourselves, which is, for example, I've been Amritdhari for a long time, brought up in an Amritdhari family, come to camps my whole life, and been exposed to like Gurbani and everything. And it's only really until the last 3-4 years that I've actually been able to reflect on myself and actually make some changes. So for a long time I was doing all the external things, but I was experiencing a lot of internal conflict. So there's a lot of anger in my relationship with my husband. When the children came along, again, not able to control and manage. It again felt like a double life. So there's the part of me that comes into Sangat and looks pristine, and then the part of me at home who is a completely different person. And there was a lot of guilt. It's not that I wanted to have those double lives. It was just that sometimes when in the heat of the moment or when issues come up, I didn't have any tools. I felt I didn't, to actually regulate myself, even though I had the Gurbani and things. So Amdeep and I are going to talk a bit about the gap, the implementation gap. That we know it. We know who we want to be. We've got these role models. We've got all the qualities in Gurbani. We know the kind of people that we want to show up as. But when it comes to it, what is that gap, and how do we bridge that gap between knowledge and actually being that person, being that, Gurbani says, Manas te dev te pe, te aya naam hare, that we have the capacity to be demigods, Manas, by doing the Simran and reflecting on the Gurbani. But how do we actually make that happen? And Guru Kripa, we can explore that today, and you guys probably also have ideas about that as well.
Yeah. So I just wanted to pick up, sometimes, we understand that, once we're blessed with Amrit, everything will be okay. Or, if you sit and do your part, you do your nitnem, or you increase your part, then everything will be okay. And so I came from a background of no Sikhi, basically, didn't even know Mool Mantar, didn't know the Guru's names. And it was through Dukh, lots of Dukh, that, Maharaj Kirpa, we came on this path. But again, it was all the learning and the high that you get from connecting to Gurbani, learning about Sikhi, and then again, like it kind of plateaued. But it was only since, again, same as Benji, in the last few years where we were, Maharaj Kirpa, able to connect to Simran on a deeper level, that those changes started to happen internally. So I struggled with the kids, I felt overwhelmed, my health was not good. And again, I'd wake up every day, I'm not going to be angry today, I'm not going to be angry today. But as much as you want to not be an angry person, as much as you want those gun to be bargat within you, so it just doesn't happen. And I'm not saying, and we're not saying that we're perfect now and that's it. But there's a huge shift that we can see internally within ourselves. So we still get triggered, we still struggle, but that time between feeling triggered, getting upset, and then getting back on track is much shorter. So before, if somebody said something to me, I'm a people pleaser, someone said, you've done something wrong, it would take me weeks, months, even years. I would hold on to it. I'd ruminate, think about it over and over again. One idda kita, one idda kya, main bahut mari, oh bahut mara, ga ki hona, aaj ki hona, judging myself, judging other people. And I think just having this deeper understanding of what Simran does for us, and being able to implement that in Sangat. Sangat is key, Ardas is key, Gur Kirpa is key, but that Uddham that comes as well with that. And I think being educated in a Western system is understanding how does the Simran work to a certain extent helps to motivate that. So one of the things that was key is like we've been sitting in the vans, but while you've been sitting in the van, if you connected, have you ever felt a certain amount of peace while you're doing kirtan, while you're doing Simran, while you're doing the part? And what was the difference when you even though your family situation or your situation hasn't changed externally, sometimes there's peace there. But what is the different? What is missing, or what's the different in that moment when we're experiencing that? So that's just a question.
We often talk,
Ji.
and we've highlighted to each other the same thing that, let's say we've just done some amazing Simran here.
Ji.
As soon as we walk out that door,
Anji.
it's like we've left that realm and entered somewhere else and almost forgotten like the previous lifetime, what we've just done.
Right.
So we've not carried it with us. There's been times in my life where I've managed to hold on to feelings or whatever triggered that feeling. Let's say in this space we've just done some Kirtan, if there's a particular duk or particular something that's heightened me, when I draw on that anywhere out there, that same feeling's back and I'm rock solid. But other times where I've not managed to do that, you're empty, or that you've forgotten, completely forgotten, and you haven't taken it with you. So what I notice myself is I'm not carrying it, I'm not drawing on it, I've left it there. So that's one thing.
Yeah, completely spot on.
I would say it's probably not so even the Amrita session this morning, the only word that I can use to describe it is prakash,
right.
And it's like when you're no longer there, and the Bani's going on, and it's like this, it's the sangat, and it's the energy which makes you lose yourself, and it's only when you can be comfortable, you're not thinking, it's when the mind switches off, and you're no longer who you are, you're no longer in that space, you're no longer in time, it's just actually letting go enough, and that's what the practice of Simran is trying to take you to.
So there's a presence of something, which is that it's not even a feeling, it's an experience of peace, of bliss, and then there's an absence of something, which for me, you hit the nail on the head, which is the thinking, right? The thoughts. So Benji's going to hopefully kind of go into that. But for me, that was key. It's like when I'm not thinking, Gurbani says you can't have Naam and Homme at the same time. So every time I'm thinking about my problem, or my future, or my past, or so-and-so, my relationship with somebody, there's some suffering there, there's some pain there, and which causes suffering. I am judging something. But when we're in that state of connection, there's no me, there's no male left in there, there's connection. So Benji hopefully is going to start to explain some of that.
So, this thing you said about being in a different realm, we are in a different realm in that space. We're in our true home. Gurbani tells us that we're actually in our Nijkar, our Thirkar, Begumpura Shahr, Dasam Dwar, Sun. We're outside of the realm of Maya when we are connecting to Vaiguruji, presence, consciousness. So when we do the Simran, the internal family, or very good. Okay, so there's a few concepts from Gurbani that have, I think, really helped us to explore this disconnect between those two aspects of ourselves sometimes. So Gurbani tells us that we have an internal family within us. So we have the mind. We have the Panch Chor. इस देही अंदर पंच चोर बसे काम क्रोध लोभ मोह अहंकारा अमृत लूटे they steal our amrit manmukh nahi bujhe koi na sune pukara. So we've got there's this game going on, this game of life that Gurbani talks about, karte khel jaya, So within there are some key players. You've got the mind, Panch Chor, Atma, you've got other family members as well, Chitragupt, Dharamraj, the ego, it's a few. Gurbani tells us that the mind is the Raja, the king of this body kingdom that we have here. But this body is not our true, it's not ours really. We are the mind that resides within the body. Okay, we've had maybe bodies like this many, many times before. And we've had situations like this many, many times before. So Gurbani tells us that ultimately our purpose in this life is to merge back into Vaiguruji while we're living, so that we can experience that eternal peace while we're here and go back to Vaiguruji when time comes to leave our body. But we've been playing this game for many, many jugs. So Kal Jug is the final phase of the game. So while we're straddling these two worlds, we're living in this desh, which Gurbani actually calls Galda desh, which is Dadda Dera eh nahi, but this isn't our true Dera. This isn't our true space or home. we've got an eternal home where if we can connect to that, like Baju was saying, when we're in the Sangha, when we're doing the Simran, we're in that internal home. And that's why we experience that bliss, that love, contentment. We have access to that. But then what happens is when we come out of that internal home, that Nijgar, then we are subject to the Panchor. So when we find ourselves in interactions with our children, there's conflict, or with our partners, or we're lying, or we're cheating, or we're gossiping, or whatever it is, we are actually, the mind is asleep at that point. And Gurbani tells us that the Panchjor, they kind of put a net over our eyes, our ears, our nose, everything, so that we forget at that moment the truth of who we are and why we're here. So Kal Jal Jehva Arnani, Ganni Kal Sune Bikabani. The Jal is placed over all of our senses, so that we're literally asleep, that we're not in control of what we're doing. So it's almost as if there's this internal family that the mind has to try and manage, that Gurbani is telling us about. Okay, when we are that double life, it's not that we are bad people and that, this is terrible, but actually there's this internal game going on. And Gurbani tells these Panchor are Mahabali. They're really, really strong. They're really powerful. Guru Arjan Dev Ji says, was it Panch Bikhadi? Ek Gariba, Rakho Rakhanhare. Okay, these Bikhadi, these are Panch, they're really strong, and I'm just one poor me. Like, why would you please save me? Please help me through this game. So once we start to learn that there is an internal game going on, and that Guruji is giving us the instructions and is telling us who the team players are and what we need to do, then there's a little bit more, for me, like it changed everything. There's so much more compassion. I used to feel so guilty all the time, like, I'm such a bad person. Why can't I control myself? Why can't I manage my anger? Then when you look at it in a different way, you're like, okay, this is what's going on within me. So now maybe I can stand back and start to think, okay, what does Gurbani tell me about how do I manage each of these things? What's going on, I don't know if you want to add at this point. Okay. Does anybody want to comment on anything at this point? Or?
I would say, I think for a lot of people, and certainly new coming into Simran, it's very difficult to drop the mind, and a lot of Simran is still with the mind, and that's why you can do Simran for a long time without experiencing any prakash, because the mind, we don't actually have to stop it or get rid of it. So I think that comes with grace, it comes with time, I don't know, but it's a different, you can do Simran for a long time without.
Definitely. You can do Simran in Tregun, right? So Gurbani tells us, that we can read Gurbani and do Simran while our mind is in Tregun, which I'm going to just explain, but we'll never really get the essence of Harta. We will never really get to that essence and get to that bliss. So I'm just going to explain a concept. It can be quite complicated, but it's really changed my life. That's why I'm sharing it, because it's otherwise I think it's a bit too complicated. But Gurbani tells us that Maya is made up of Tregun. Rajogun, Tamogun, Sasogun, Kehiye, Eteri Sadmaya. So this is the realm of Maya that Gurbani describes as Maya da Garab. In the same way that when the mind is in the mother's womb and is in the Garab of Agan, the Agan, this is Maya da Garab. It's like an Agan here as well, because when we're in this Maya, it's difficult, it's painful. Whereas above this Maya is our true home, which is, like we were talking about, the two realms. So the mind, sometimes when we're in Sangat, when we're doing Simran and we're connecting, when we're not having thoughts, we're in our true home, Sasandawar, Sun. Whereas when we are in thoughts, which is what this Maya represents, then we are not within our true home. So thoughts, Rajogun, when we're in Rajogun, Gurbani tells us that we're in hopes, wishes, desires, anxieties, expectation. Which we all come to some extent, to have a family life, to look after our children, to do our livelihoods. Sometimes the mind goes into tamogun. And Gurbani describes that as big saga, ocean of poison. So this is where we've got the 5 B's: lust, anger, greed, attachment, ego, slander, gossip, hatred, duality. And this is a very painful place to be. I mean, I know when I'm in it, whenever I'm in that space, mentally, there's a lot of internal turmoil there. And then we've got Satogun, which in Gurbani is described as Sukh Sagar, the ocean of peace. So when the mind is here, then we are in compassion. We're practicing dharam, which Gurbani tells us is naam. We are patient, tolerant, forgiving. This is kind of where we want to be, Hana. But Gurbani tells us all of this is Maya, is Tragun Maya. And what happens is that when the mind comes into the body in the morning, so every night the mind goes to its true home, Dasandwar. That's why we get a bit of respite. When we're sleeping, we're rested, we feel better after we've slept. As soon as the mind comes into the body, the Panch Jor jump on it. Gurbani tells us they're waiting at the door. Panch peherwa dar mein rehte, inka nahi patyara. So they're waiting at the door, they jump on the mind, and they take the mind spinning into this web of Maya. So sometimes we're in Sukh Sagar, so we do something nice for somebody, or we feel good feelings. But sometimes then we get swept into Tamogun, or we get swept into Rajogun, and we're constantly spinning in this web. And there's, when I'm struggling with my Simran or not connecting, I find myself in this turmoil and I don't know what to do. I try. This is where we set the intentions. I'm going to be a good person now. I'm going to do really good. And then suddenly get swept into Tammo. And I'm like, what just happened? Or we go into Rajo and we're spinning. Does anybody relate to that feeling of just constantly being swept in this web? Hana? So then Gurbani tells us that there is a way out, thankfully, Guru Kirpa. And the way out is, the Quran says there's two paths. So we've got the path from Rajo to Tama, which is of Taat, falsehood. So Gurbani says, live Taat, doi rah hai, hukmi kar kamai. There's two paths. There's a live, path of live, which is love, and Taat, which is falsehood. Jin prem kiyo, til hi prapayo. Right? So Gurbani tells us that when the mind comes into the body, if we become aware and awake for that moment, we can start to play the game and make choices. We're talking about sometimes when we can make that space, there's a bit of space or a pause or like a kind of an awakening moment where we're like, this is who I want to be, that space. If we can invite that into our morning, just as the mind comes in, we have an opportunity to think, okay, where do I want my mind to be today? The mind is, Rajogun, I can see the mind's kind of going into that direction, I can see it going in there. Where do I want the mind to be? And Gurbani tells us that this is the marg that you want to follow. You want to switch from here, in a bit the pasta talobir. You want to go to a different path, which is this one, the path of love. Sant ka marg, it's also called Sant ka marg, dharam ki paudi, govard pagi pave. So Gurbani tells us that we do our livelihood as we need to. We have certain ambitions and goals, a little. But as we do the Simran, and Simran doesn't mean just sitting down, but with our eyes open, we become so good at doing the practice of coming to the present moment without vichar, that we're walking up this ladder. And as we become good at that, what happens is that we start to come away from this path, and we start to walk up this path. So we start to see the qualities of these coming within us. But actually we start to go beyond. When we start to experience, many of you will have sat in meditation and had experiences of bliss and peace without thought, and stayed there for some time maybe. When we start to stay there, spend our time here, then transformation starts to happen. And I think this is where, do you want to come in and share your experience of that? Where we started to spend more time, because I'd never done Simran before really, even though I'd been in Sikhi for a very, very long time.
I think it relates to Benji's point as well. Like you said, you did it, but you weren't. You don't necessarily feel that. So, in terms of practically, that's a lot of information to take in, and we've got a very small amount of time. But in terms, and I'm a solutions person, if you like. But in terms of practically, how does this work? What does it mean? So first of all, we need a jukti, we need a way, we need someone to teach us. How do you actually do it? Do you just sit there and say Vaheguru? Is it about the feeling? Is it about singing it and feeling? Because that's still within Maya. Like, I use that, like I sing it to elevate my level, like how I'm feeling to a certain extent. But as we said, it's about going beyond thought. So we all sit, we're like, oh, I've got too many thoughts, I can't meditate, I can't do Simran. And that's the whole point, is because when do we stop? People even take their phone to the toilet with them these days, so you don't even have 5 minutes in the bathroom
I've done that,
where you're
so
not.
guilty.
I'm only saying it because I've done it as well, right? So, yes, when we sit to do Simran, when we're doing our part, the vichar are going to come because they're always going on. So first of all is we've got to be patient, we've got to be compassionate. So when we're focusing, as we did, on the sound of our voice, we're focusing on the mantra. Some people use a certain type of breath work, like we say, Swasgra, so Vai, inhaling, Guru, exhaling, reciting very loudly to begin with. That, for me, definitely, that helps me to settle the vichar. So first of all, you're going to have a lot of thoughts as you're doing it. But just like you can't run a marathon in a week, you can't pick up the heaviest weight in a month, it's practice, it's abhyas. We call it abhyas, Hana? What does abhyas mean? It's practice, Hana? So as at the beginning, it's going to be a practice, we're going to sit. But even if in 1 minute, Hanji.
This group's going in the next group.
Okay, take it.
Done.
Okay. So even if for 1 minute, we go beyond vichar in a whole minute, for 1 second, then that's progress. So we continue that, Hana? As we sit and we do it more regularly, we're going to have 2 seconds, we're going to have 10 seconds. So the idea is we're too quick to give up. So that's one thing. But as we go beyond, as the vichar get less, as there's more space between the vichar, eventually what can happen with Maharaj's Kirpa is you will go completely beyond vichar. And that's where you can start to access these states. So I'm talking low level in terms of my experience. There's much more beyond that. I don't know because I haven't been there. But in terms of our experience collectively, is going to that place which you might call sun, where there is no thought. Like you're vibrating on the mantra, on the Guru mantra. Even that at some point falls away. Like it's an internal process.
So Gurbani says, Sun Samad Sacha Karbara, that our true home is sun. So when we vichar mare tare tare, when we kill the vichar, that we go to a place, there's a space there that is beyond thought that Benji's talking about, that ends up, that transforms us in that space. Because we're in the realm of Vaiguruji then, who is capable of everything and has all of the qualities that we want to embody.
And then there's less effort. Because like we were saying, every day we wake up and we're like, I'm going to try and be a different person. So our experience has been, there's less effort. You just show up as a different person. You're just calmer. You're just patient. And it's not that we never get triggered. We do. But like I said, that space between recovering from that and coming back and understanding that it's always just the vichar that is causing my suffering. So I went to see my mum and she started saying something to me and I got really annoyed. I started to feel the anger, the frustration coming up. But now that I knew this, I knew that even while I'm washing the dishes, because the practice has been done, while I'm washing the dishes, I can connect to the mantra. So rather than judging her or having angry thoughts towards her, I could come back to that present moment, to remembering Vaiguru, praising Vaiguru rather than thinking about myself. And within a couple of seconds after practice, I was back to neutral and I was like, yeah, I can do all these good jobs. And that pyar had come up again. And it's in the doing, so it's an experience. So it's only something we can experience as we do it. So as we're running out of time, we're just going to spend a couple of minutes doing the Simran. And then if anybody has any questions, maybe you can find us later.
Gurbani tells us, Tona meh dhyan, dhyan meh janiya, Gurmukh akat kahani, that if we place our attention in the sound, then Gurmukh akat, that we understand, we get the Brahmgyan from inside. So we're going to chant the mantra, Vaiguru, and we're going to listen carefully to the sound of our voice while we're chanting, and we're going to keep bringing the mind back to the sound. Thoughts are going to come up, Tamoguni thoughts, Rajoguni thoughts, Satoguni thoughts, they're all going to come up, but we're going to keep bringing the attention back. Vaiguru, 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 Guru, Why, 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 Guru.